Hello. Thank you very much, Danila. Hello, everybody. Great to be here. Great to see that quite many people came to this session, at least. So I'm Jonas Lind. I'm going to talk about the Europe foundational flagship project, OpenEuroLLM. I work at AI Sweden with this great team here, NLU team. My wife told me I had to have some graphics actually on my slides. So I generated a bunch of graphics based on the context on the slides and some stuff on OpenEuroLLM. So the kind of abstract kind of graphics on it. I don't know what you think about it, but yeah, at least you know where they come from. Let's see if it works. Yeah. So OpenEuroLLM is for training sovereign large language models, foundation models for Europe. What do we mean by being sovereign in this case? Yeah, it's the transparency and the openness. With the openness in this case, we mean that we share everything. So the code, the pipelines, the models, of course, the data, everything, the recipes. So far, the project has been going on for a year. We're supposed to release flagship models halfway, and then in the end of the project, of course. This means that we already now, while working out different experiments and everything, we have already trained a massive amount of models, I would say, of very small scale, because that's what you do when you try to figure out and predict what the largest models are going to look like. So in this case, we've trained a lot of small models that you can find on Hugging Face, but also an annotation tool called Propeller, which can annotate text from, I think, over 40 languages, and I think up to like 17 different categories, like what it contains and the quality of the text and so on. And those are freely downloadable from the internet. Already from the start, the whole project is supposed to be EU compliant, whatever that means. For us, it means that we continuously have a task force on legal issues that work alongside, but don't necessarily always integrate with the data pipeline people at the first point, but in intermediate checks. So, but it means that from the start and throughout the whole project, we're going to try to figure this out. It doesn't mean that it is an easy question to answer, but we're supposed to be EU-compliant models that we release. When it comes to languages, we target, of course, the 24 official languages of the EU, but also the candidate countries, which is sum up to something like 37. Different languages, some of them very small. We work with 20 partners in 9 different EU countries. All of them very knowledgeable in different parts of building large language models in Europe. Both commercial companies, you see, so not all of them are in the picture, I think, and university institutes, and so on. One of the great graphics that Gemini produced. I think it looks pretty good when I'm going to talk about the EuroHPC. One interesting thing when you get these huge flagship projects in the EU, you get a lot of funding and everything, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have all the compute when you get the project. So the next step is actually trying to get a massive load of compute on the EuroHPC networks or clusters. That meant that we had to, apply continuously. We still do for compute all the time. But one great effort that we had to do was to try to get the EuroHPC to provide us with something called strategic allocation, which we succeeded with in December. That means that we get up to 5% of all EuroHPC compute in Europe during the rest of the project. That sounds a lot. And it is, but to train LLMs of large scale, means that you need a lot of compute. So currently we work on Lumi, for example, with thousands of AMD GPUs. We work on Leonardo in Italy, NVIDIA, as well as Mar Nostrum in Spain, also NVIDIA partitions. And of course Jupyter, which is the biggest one. And that's the one we have to use more or less to be able to train the largest models, flagship models, within a reasonable amount of time, I would say. And it's also been down for periods and so on, so you can imagine. But we work on all of these now at the same time, so which means that we also have to try to create automatic workflows for everything, and that the workflows actually work across all these clusters somehow. So we try to have a hardware agnostic setup. Doesn't mean we solved it completely, but any framework like Megatron LM or anything that you use for training LLMs, we try to find a version that actually works on one of the clusters, usually an NVIDIA one, and then try to see that there's a version that actually works on the AMD or Lumi as well. Yep. We work, of course, in the way of using empirical scaling laws. This means by trying to quantify all the time how much compute is needed and try to predict the loss we want to have with a certain amount of data mix, certain kind of setting, and a certain kind of architecture. And currently, we work both or mostly within the dense structure that we're probably, at least for the first flagship model, is going to create dense models. But we also have a track where we do scaling laws for a mixture of experts, so sparse models. So who knows what, now it's really popular to have some kind of hybrid system as well. So maybe that's the one where we're going to end up in the end of the project. We'll see. Like I said, even training a lot of smaller models means a lot of compute. So you actually have to calculate this all the time and create smaller projects on how you are experimenting when you're doing this, which means we've created a lot of 2B models. Those are base models, not instruction tuned, that we release continuously. And that's for different kinds of experiments or data mixing of different ratios and so on, like multilingual, how much English, and so on. And this is necessary, of course, to keep track of how much compute that we actually spend. So even though we have this massive strategic allocation, we continuously apply for new compute all the time, because it's necessary to perform all these experiments and at the same time plan for actually training a huge model in the end. And that's going to have to be probably on the Jupyter, because they have the largest node, connected node. And currently, we work on a huge data catalog that we have. But we're aiming for having around 15 trillion tokens in the first models training. When it comes to a really nice picture, that one as well, I think. Jonas does a good work talking about data. So the data catalog is actually on GitHub. I think it's open. I think you can actually, you can go there and check it. What databases, what kind of data are we actually looking into? It doesn't mean we're going to use all of it, because it's an enormous pipeline that everything goes through, of course. But you can actually check it there and what kind of data sources we experiment with, what we're going to do. In the consortium, there's a bunch of people also working in HPLT, which that's going to probably be the multilingual core. And they're releasing the version 4 that we actually work on in May. Within the project, we've had other sub-projects. One of them is called Multisynth. This is all on the Hugging Face and everything that you can find as well. We continuously release data from that as well. Multisynth means that we've actually machine translated into most of the languages that we're aiming for, but only using Nematron CC high quality part to actually fill out missing data for especially then low resource languages, but also to complete some other languages as well, if it improves the model, of course. which it seems to do. We also released a dataset called Mixture Vitae. Supposed to be extremely compliant. You can read the paper. Dataset, and it has at least shown very promising results, training smaller models, especially for coding and math. There's also a track within the project. We call it hunt and scavenge part, which means that we, of course, try to find even more data, and especially for the low-resource languages. And some of the natural parts to where to look for data is, of course, like academic papers in the different countries, but also like public documents, like maybe the public sector can have parts of their data released or something like that. So that's what they try to do in that part. And then, as I mentioned, of course, there's an enormous pipeline that everything goes through, meaning that you have to duplicate everything, decontaminate all the data, and, of course, check for PII, all that stuff, of course. We continuously work on this. I can't not mention the great team, and most of them are in front of me here. You can raise your hands. Wave, wave. The NLU team, which I really appreciate to work with every day. That I learned so much from all of them every day. And we, like Nina, our head, just came in and fixed a lot of stuff. We have Emilia, who's actually organizing a lot of the next consortium meeting for OpenEuroLLM, which is going to be in Stockholm in June. Another good deadline to check. Miela is our master student. You can ask her anything about mixture of experts. Great. So a lot of different people there. Danila that you saw as well. Amaru is actually running the task for post-training, together with Anna and Niklas working with Magnus on pipeline as well. So a lot of people to ask questions afterwards, not just me. Great. So when it comes to the task that Amaru is leading, we're of course experimenting a lot with SFT, but also DPO, and last thing we actually checked was something called SDPO. Never heard about it before, but that was really interesting. We had a paper reading about that. And of course, a lot of reinforcement learning that for this first post-training pipeline that we have to finish for this autumn when we train the first flagship models. One interesting thing I thought is, or that we're thinking about is, of course, the multilingual stuff. We know that the other languages often sound like, translated English. So one thing we've been thinking about, just to inspire you some way, inspire you, is to translate like English text, round trip, and then see the degraded translation slowly, use that as a negative signal, and compare it, and then actually improve the other language of the model. I think that's going to be really interesting to see if we can do that. As well, for the post-training pipeline, we again try to work hardware agnostic, so we can run this pipeline on any of the EuroHPC clusters that we're working on. With different frameworks like TRL and Olmo Core, a lot of Olmo. Olmo is one of the few from Allen Institute in the US. It's actually one of the few that seems to be as transparent as our project wants to be. We sort of divided the post-training stuff. You have to correct me, maybe this is wrong now, maybe we decided something else. We'll see. You have to ask Amaru. But at least for the first flagships to have context length extension seems reasonable, right? And of course, instruction following, but also for the multilingual part where we started actually translating a lot of conversation data as well into different languages. But of course, I mean, in the upcoming models, we will have to consider more reasoning stuff, maybe especially mathematical reasoning, tool calling, of course, but also agentic workflow. And we do this by cooperating with both like Skatteverket here in Sverige, but also, that's like one use case more for us, but also other EU projects like LLMs for EU, which have a massive amount of use cases all over Europe, where they want to use our models, of course, to then adapt the models for their specific use cases, like telecom, public sector. and so on. When it comes to evaluation, there's yet another, whole scientific area of benchmarking everything, which is not very easy. I throw out some of the core benchmarks that we've been using, of course, and there's no surprises really. There's all of them that most of us use that train LLMs. It's quite different thing to evaluate base models, they only predict the next word and not really instruction tune or anything. And when it comes to the multilingual part, it's even more difficult because we know that most benchmarks are also just machine translated. And then you evaluate on that, and then those benchmarks, of course, check for like English translated stuff, which is a problem as well. So that's a continuous thing as well. Try to develop or find new benchmark and evaluations for all the other languages. One project that we work together with is called EuroVal. Probably you run into that as well. We'll see how we can use that in the future as well. Doing this on the different clusters again, because we've created a tool, automatic tool, for evaluating, of course, running on all the HPCs. That's, of course, using Hugging Face Literal, some ways for the quantitative part of just getting back scores. But also when it comes down to the post-training part, you're going to probably have to have some kind of LLM as a judge. And I could use Judge Arena for that. And all the code and everything, like I said, it's released continuously on GitHub. You can find it through our website and everything. And we do this continuously, of course, in different tracks and on different clusters all the time to experiment and see that everything works before going on to the next step. It's an extremely positive project. I think I'm extremely optimistic on what kind of models we're going to be able to create. Saying that, I'm not going to say this is easy, like integrating everything over all HPC clusters and everything. So, and in the organizational part, there's 20 different partners, and of course, different people from different parts of Europe and different organizations lead different work packages and tasks, which could be an organizational hell. But if you have a really good positive spirit and everything, I think this actually is the best project I've been involved in so far. And it's really, really positive, and everybody's really working towards the same goal, which is great. So I'm very, very positive about this. The next milestone I thought was an 8B model. I think now it's going to be 9B, because last Monday they released 2 9B models, which are then base models, and they're trained on, well, different mixtures of English, actually, amount of English code and a multilingual part in percentages. So there's 2 different 9B models that we can then use for the different experiments in the post-training pipeline. We're aiming for then at least 70B and 100B plus maybe in the end of the project. But everything depends on compute, of course, architecture, how much data and everything, as you can understand. But that's the aim so far. But also, of course, very usable models that I hope everybody here are going to be able to use both commercially or in research and everything. But everything depends on so many different things, so we'll see. But there's a high ambition in the project. So there's the website, there's the Hugging Face, there's the GitHub. Everything is open to check questions and everything. Thank you very much. Great graphics. Very interesting.
Thank you so much, Jonas. May this be one step forward towards sovereignty, I guess.
We hope.
We have tons of questions for you.
Oh.
The first question is, very nice beard. Do you use any product to keep it straight?
What? Any product?
Sorry. Product. No, it's fine. We'll take it off stage. Now, seriously, OpenAI and Anthropic are rolling out models that are larger than 5 trillion parameters. Oh. And you talk about complex models with 2 billion parameters. It feels like we are many, many years behind the US. Do you see we can catch up, or is this more research initiatives? And
Good question.
I can also, if you want, because you can take this, and you can combine also with another angle. Where do you see Europe having then a competitive edge in LLM development? On the research side, the engineering side, or in areas like trustworthy and unbiased models?
Yeah, I think there are different levels of that. So I mean, there's one part of using these extreme huge models, and that's API development. You do software, and it's based on API calling and everything. It's fine, and you're going to pay for tokens. I think it's going to be a problem, both security-wise maybe, but also a cost issue in the long run. I mean, second part is if you want to use models on-prem or your own models and so on, then I think it's more of a question of, oh, is it as good as ChatGPT? I don't know. What do you want to do with the model? And in this case, these models are supposed to be so good that you can use it for a lot of different use cases within Europe, on-prem or in whatever way you want, research commercially or whatever, open licenses for everything, and full transparency. And I think that's really important. And it's an important difference that if you want to deploy things yourself, that's a different level and something that you want something usable and something you can trust and something that's software and created within Europe and aligned with European values, ethics, whatever, and the languages, of course. So I think there's a couple of different levels, like API. Okay, you want on-premise models. There are a bunch of different models, but okay, what data was it trained on? Oh, we don't know. This case, we definitely know. You can check it and so on. So that's the different, like the 3 different levels. Of
that's
what
how we should think about
yeah.
it. Thank you so much. From the audience, we have this question: how do you think about the environmental footprint of AI training? Are there efforts being made to mitigate it?
Yeah, I mean that's basically the scaling laws I was talking about. So that you actually plan everything and try to predict everything, so that you use as small of a footprint as possible when training these huge LLMs, because it takes a lot of compute. And I guess in another way of thinking about it, it has to do with how are the data centers, how are the clusters created, and what kind of energy are they using, and so on. And I think that's a completely different issue on how you're running these. And I think maybe Robert, next speaker, is going to talk a bit about that.
Yeah, that's actually the best transition that I can ask for. We have more questions for you, but we don't have a lot of time for it. Thank you so much. Please give a round of applause to Jonas Lind. And please, Jonas, accept what we thought would be the best gift for a Gothenburg weather. Not today. Not today.
Not today, no. It's very
Thank
sunny.
you so much.
Thank you very much.